He discovers the text by accident, not current ones, archived messages from 2 years ago that reveal a side of her he's never experienced. The enthusiasm, the wild adventures, the immediate availability she gave to someone who never committed, never invested, never even bothered to learn her last name. Meanwhile, he waited 3 months just to hold her hand and proposed before experiencing the passion she freely distributed to men who treated her like entertainment. The betrayal isn't that she had previous relationships, it's that she gave her best self to people who deserved it least, while reserving her most restrained, careful, conditional version for the man who loved her enough to build a life with her. The theft isn't about her virginity or some outdated notion of purity. It's about discovering that her capacity for desire, adventure, and sexual generosity was apparently finite, and he received the smallest portion despite making the largest investment. This isn't about being insecure or controlling. This isn't about unrealistic expectations or double standards. This is about recognizing that you're experiencing what feels like emotional embezzlement. Discovering that someone you love distributed their most valuable emotional and physical currency to people who never earned it, while making you pay premium prices for discounted experiences. You know this feeling. Maybe you've lived this discovery. The moment when you realize that her sexual past isn't just history. It's an active competitor for the quality of experience she's willing to provide you. The recognition that you're not getting her best self, but rather her most cautious, calculated, conditional version. Today, I'm going to explain why learning about her sexual history can feel like discovering you've been emotionally robbed, and how understanding the psychology behind these feelings can help you navigate one of the most devastating realizations men face in modern relationships. The core wound of discovering her sexual past isn't jealousy about other men touching her body. It's the devastating realization that you're receiving a lower return on a higher investment than men who invested almost nothing. This creates what I call an investment return crisis, where the economics of your relationship feel fundamentally unfair. This crisis operates like discovering unfavorable marketplace terms where your higher investment yielded lower returns than minimal investments from others. The analysis becomes devastating when you recognize that her passion and availability peaked with men who offered minimal commitment, while making you wait months for what they received immediately. The investment return crisis also reveals itself in the effort required to access different levels of intimacy with her. Previous partners received immediate access to her most adventurous, passionate, uninhibited self. You have to negotiate for basic physical affection and beg for the kind of enthusiasm she apparently gave freely to men who saw her as disposable. This analysis explains why the number of previous partners often matters less than the terms under which those relationships operated. A woman who had multiple serious relationships where she required commitment before intimacy feels different than a woman who gave her best experiences to casual partners while making committed partners wait and work for inferior treatment. Understanding this investment return crisis helps explain why discovering her sexual past can feel like discovering you've been scammed. The terms of your relationship, high investment for limited return, suddenly seem unfair when compared to the terms others received. The crisis creates lasting damage because it changes how you view the fundamental fairness of your relationship. Every future sexual encounter becomes contaminated by the knowledge that what feels special to you was apparently routine for her with men who meant nothing. Perhaps the most devastating aspect of learning about her sexual past is recognizing what I call enthusiasm deficit syndrome. The gut-wrenching realization that her passion, excitement, and sexual energy were apparently finite resources that she depleted on previous partners, leaving you with her tired, cautious, restrained remainder. This syndrome manifests when you discover that she was more adventurous, more spontaneous, more physically generous, and more sexually creative with men who treated her poorly than she is with you, despite your superior treatment, commitment, and investment in her well-being. This deficit manifests through comparison of energy levels. Previous partners received immediate, passionate, unrestricted access. You require negotiation, scheduling, conditions, and experience what feels more like duty than desire. This creates relationship inflation, where your investment increases while experience quality decreases. You provide more commitment and resources while receiving less enthusiasm and authenticity. The syndrome also reveals itself in her comfort level with different activities. Previous partners had access to experiences and levels of intimacy that you're told are off limits, uncomfortable, or simply not her preference. This suggests that her preferences aren't fixed characteristics, but rather variable responses based on her attraction level and enthusiasm for different partners. The most painful aspect of enthusiasm deficit syndrome is recognizing that her sexual identity was apparently more developed and adventurous in the past than it is with you. She's become more conservative, more restrictive, and more sexually limited in what should be her most committed and secure relationship. This syndrome explains why sexual past revelation often destroys relationship satisfaction, even when the current sexual relationship seemed adequate before the discovery. The context changes everything. What felt like normal sexual connection suddenly feels like settling for scraps. Understanding enthusiasm deficit syndrome helps explain why her reassurances about the past not mattering often ring hollow. When someone's capacity for passion appears to have diminished specifically in relationship to their increased investment in you, it's difficult to interpret this as anything other than decreased attraction, disguised as maturity. The revelation of her sexual past often exposes what I call a value exchange catastrophe, the recognition that the marketplace terms of your relationship are fundamentally different from the terms offered to previous partners, and significantly worse despite your higher value as a long-term partner. The catastrophe operates like discovering unfavourable economic terms, where luxury investment yields economy returns, while others receive premium service at no cost. The exchange reveals that her generosity peaked when emotional investment was minimal. As commitment supposedly increased, sexual enthusiasm decreased, creating confusion about what dedication actually means. The catastrophe also manifests in timeline comparisons. Previous partners accessed her best sexual self within days or weeks. You waited months to achieve basic intimacy, and years to experience enthusiasm levels that she apparently offered immediately to men who never committed to her. This creates what I call relationship penalty syndrome, where being a good partner actually results in worse treatment than being a casual partner. The men who treated her as temporary entertainment received better terms than the man who treated her as permanent partnership material. The value exchange catastrophe explains why many men feel that modern dating punishes investment and rewards detachment. The evidence suggests that emotional distance and minimal commitment often produce better sexual terms than emotional investment and maximum commitment. Understanding this catastrophe helps explain why learning about her sexual past can destroy your sense of being valued and appreciated. When the economic terms of your relationship seem designed to punish rather than reward your investment, the entire foundation of the partnership feels fraudulent. The catastrophe also reveals why her claims about growth, maturity, and learning to value real love often feel like rationalizations rather than explanations. If maturity means less enthusiasm and growth means less generosity, then maturity and growth become relationship liabilities rather than assets. One of the most psychologically damaging aspects of discovering her sexual past is confronting what I call the attachment security paradox, the counterintuitive realization that she was more sexually generous and emotionally available when she felt less secure in relationships than she is now that she feels completely secure with you. This paradox contradicts relationship logic. Security should enhance intimacy, but you discover her openness peaked during uncertainty periods. The paradox shows in her willingness to explore and prioritize satisfaction. Previous partners received peak performance during pursuit phases. You receive maintenance-level engagement once commitment is secured. This creates what psychologists call secure attachment punishment, where achieving the relationship goal of making her feel safe and loved actually results in decreased rather than increased intimacy and passion. The security you work to create becomes a passion killer rather than a passion enhancer. The paradox also manifests in effort levels and enthusiasm. Previous partners received her peak performance during the pursuit phase when she was trying to win their interest and commitment. You receive maintenance-level effort now that your commitment is secured and your departure is unlikely. This attachment security paradox explains why many long-term relationships suffer from declining passion and increasing routine. The emotional safety that should enhance intimacy instead seems to eliminate the excitement and uncertainty that originally drove her highest levels of sexual and emotional investment. Understanding this paradox helps explain why her sexual past feels like theft, not just of experiences, but of her capacity for the kind of passionate, enthusiastic, generous love that she was apparently capable of providing when she felt less secure about keeping someone. The paradox also reveals why her reassurances about preferring committed relationships often feel hollow when accompanied by decreased rather than increased sexual enthusiasm and generosity. If you're starting to understand why discovering your partner's sexual past can feel like emotional robbery and want to learn more about navigating these complex psychological dynamics, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. The emotional realities I'm explaining today represent some of the most challenging aspects of modern relationships, and there's much more depth to explore in upcoming videos about attachment, attraction, and relationship psychology. Learning about her sexual past creates what I call a performance competition matrix, where every intimate moment becomes contaminated by awareness that you're competing against previous partners' performances, and the statistical reality suggests you're unlikely to rank first in her historical experience. This matrix operates like discovering that every presentation you give at work will be compared to the best presentations given by people who no longer work there, and that you'll be judged not on absolute quality, but on relative ranking against performers you can never observe or learn from. The competition becomes particularly devastating when you realize that her enthusiasm level serves as a real-time ranking system. Her willingness to initiate, experiment, and prioritize your satisfaction directly correlates with how your performance compares to her historical experiences. This creates what I call sexual performance anxiety amplification, where normal relationship intimacy becomes a high-stakes competition against invisible opponents with unknown capabilities and historical advantages like novelty, youth, and her peak enthusiasm periods. The matrix also reveals why sexual technique advice often feels inadequate when competing against her past. You're not just trying to be good, you're trying to be better than potentially dozens of previous partners who had advantages you can't replicate, like being her first experience with certain activities or accessing her during peak physical and emotional periods. The statistical reality is particularly cruel. If she's had multiple partners, the probability that you'll rank as her best sexual experience decreases dramatically with each additional historical partner. You're competing in a tournament where the odds are stacked against you, and the competition includes unknown performers with potential advantages you can't overcome. Understanding this performance competition matrix helps explain why sexual confidence often plummets after learning about her past. The awareness that you're being evaluated against historical performances creates pressure that can actually damage your current performance, creating a negative feedback loop. The matrix also explains why her reassurances about technique or performance often fail to address the core issue. The problem isn't your absolute performance level, it's your relative ranking in her personal experience database, and that ranking system includes competitors you can never outperform due to timing, novelty, or circumstantial advantages. One of the most disturbing implications of her sexual past is understanding what I call the loyalty correlation algorithm, the recognition that her sexual satisfaction with you directly predicts her likelihood of staying faithful, and that her historical experiences have set performance standards that may be impossible for you to achieve consistently. This algorithm operates on research showing that women's relationship satisfaction and fidelity correlate strongly with their sexual satisfaction, creating a situation where your sexual performance becomes the foundation of relationship security rather than just one component of overall compatibility. The correlation becomes devastating when combined with her sexual history, because it means that her capacity for loyalty is partially determined by how you compare to previous partners' performances. If you can't consistently match or exceed her historical sexual experiences, the algorithm predicts increased likelihood of infidelity or relationship termination. This creates what I call performance-based relationship security, where your position in the relationship depends not just on your character, commitment, and compatibility, but on your ability to sexually outperform men you've never met in activities you may have no information about. The algorithm also explains why sexual enthusiasm serves as an early warning system for relationship problems. When her excitement and engagement decrease, it may signal not just reduced attraction, but increased vulnerability to alternatives who might provide superior sexual experiences. The loyalty correlation becomes particularly problematic when you realize that her sexual history has potentially established performance baselines that you're unaware of but are being measured against constantly. You're playing a game where you don't know the rules, the scoring system, or the performance standards required to win. Understanding this algorithm helps explain why sexual past revelation often creates lasting relationship anxiety rather than temporary discomfort. The knowledge that her loyalty partially depends on your sexual performance relative to previous partners creates ongoing pressure that can persist throughout the relationship. The algorithm also reveals why her sexual past isn't just historical information, it's active competition that influences current relationship dynamics and future relationship stability through its impact on her satisfaction levels and comparison standards. Discovering her sexual past often reveals what I call emotional currency devaluation, the recognition that experiences, gestures, and intimacies that feel special and meaningful to you were apparently common and easily distributed to others, fundamentally altering their value and significance. This devaluation operates like discovering that currency you thought was rare and valuable is actually common and has been freely distributed to people who never earned it through effort, investment, or commitment to the economic system you're participating in. The devaluation manifests in the realization that sexual adventures, intimate moments, and physical expressions of affection that feel unique and special in your relationship were apparently routine occurrences with previous partners. The exclusivity that makes these experiences meaningful is revealed to be an illusion. This creates what economists call inflation of intimacy requirements, where increasingly dramatic gestures and experiences are required to achieve the same emotional impact that simpler expressions apparently generated with previous partners. You have to work harder to create feelings that came easier with others. The currency devaluation also affects how you interpret her current behavior and expressions of affection. Knowing that she said and did similar things with previous partners makes her current words and actions feel less authentic and meaningful, even when her feelings may be genuine. The most devastating aspect of emotional currency devaluation is recognizing that your emotional investment in exclusive experiences was one-sided. What felt like shared, intimate moments that belonged uniquely to your relationship were actually standard offerings in her relationship template. Understanding this devaluation helps explain why learning about her sexual past can permanently alter the meaning of current experiences. The context changes everything. Intimacy that felt special becomes routine when you realize it was routine for her with others. The devaluation also explains why her attempts to reassure you about the meaninglessness of past experiences often backfire. If those experiences were meaningless to her, then similar experiences with you are probably equally meaningless, which doesn't improve the situation from your perspective. One of the most psychologically damaging discoveries is what I call scarcity illusion collapse. The realization that her sexual availability, enthusiasm, and adventurousness weren't scarce resources that you earned through exceptional treatment, but rather abundant resources that she distributed freely until she decided to become more selective. This collapse operates like discovering that artwork you thought was a rare original was actually mass-produced and widely distributed, fundamentally altering your understanding of its value and your special status as its owner. The illusion manifests in recognizing that aspects of her sexuality that she presents as special gifts or rare expressions were apparently standard offerings to previous partners. Her willingness to explore, experiment, and prioritize satisfaction wasn't something you uniquely inspired, but rather something she commonly provided. This creates what I call retroactive marketplace awareness, where you suddenly understand that you are participating in a sexual economy with established rates and terms that were hidden from you until after you'd made significant investments based on false scarcity information. The collapse also reveals that her current sexual restrictions and boundaries aren't based on personal comfort levels or natural preferences, but rather on strategic decisions about resource allocation and partner hierarchy. She's capable of more than she's providing, but chooses not to provide it. The scarcity illusion collapse explains why discovering her sexual past can feel like discovering you've been scammed. You invested based on the belief that you were accessing rare resources and receiving special treatment, only to learn that you're actually receiving standard or below standard service. Understanding this collapse helps explain why her explanations about growth, maturity, and learning what she really wants often feel like rationalizations. If her capacity was abundant with others, but scarce with you, the scarcity appears artificial rather than natural. The collapse also reveals why sexual past discussions often destroy rather than improve relationship satisfaction. The illusion of scarcity was maintaining value perception, and destroying that illusion destroys the perceived value of current experiences. Perhaps the most devastating aspect of learning about her sexual past is discovering what I call the treatment hierarchy revelation, the recognition that you occupy a lower position in her treatment ranking system than men who invested less, committed less, and offered less long-term value. This hierarchy operates like a customer service system where VIP treatment goes to casual customers, while loyal, high-value customers receive standard or economy service. The logic seems backward, but the evidence is undeniable when you compare treatment terms across her relationship history. The revelation manifests in comparing effort levels, enthusiasm, availability, and willingness to please across different relationships. Previous partners received immediate access, maximum effort, and premium treatment, while you received delayed access, standard effort, and conditional treatment despite superior investment. This creates what I call relationship rank confusion, where your actual value as a partner doesn't correlate with your treatment ranking in her historical service delivery system. Better partners receive worse service, creating cognitive dissonance about how her evaluation system operates. The hierarchy revelation also exposes the gap between her stated values and her actual behavior patterns. She claims to value commitment, respect, and long-term potential, but her treatment patterns suggest she actually rewards detachment, casual interest, and short-term thinking. The most painful aspect of this revelation is recognizing that your position in her treatment hierarchy may be permanent rather than temporary. If the pattern holds across multiple relationships, then being a good partner consistently results in lower-tier treatment, suggesting the hierarchy is systemic rather than circumstantial. Understanding this hierarchy helps explain why improving your behavior and increasing your investment often fails to improve your treatment ranking. You're competing in a system where traditional relationship value doesn't correlate with service quality. The revelation also explains why her reassurances about preferring committed relationships often feel meaningless when accompanied by inferior treatment compared to uncommitted relationships. The hierarchy suggests that preference and treatment operate on different systems entirely. Learning about her sexual past creates what I call a retroactive competition framework, where you find yourself competing against partners from her history who had advantages you can never replicate, including novelty, timing, youth, and her peak enthusiasm periods. This framework operates like being forced to compete in a tournament where other players had performance-enhancing advantages that are no longer available to you, but where you'll still be ranked against their results achieved under superior conditions. The competition becomes particularly unfair when you realize that previous partners accessed her during optimal conditions. Peak physical years, maximum sexual curiosity, highest relationship enthusiasm, while you're accessing her during maintenance phases when novelty has worn off and routine has set in. This creates what I call historical disadvantage syndrome, where your competitive position is compromised not by your actual abilities, but by the timing and circumstances of when you gained access to the competition arena. The framework also reveals that you're competing not just against other men's performances, but against other versions of herself that no longer exist. The enthusiastic, adventurous, boundary-pushing version of her that previous partners experienced may be permanently gone, replaced by a more cautious, routine-focused version. The retroactive nature of this competition means that you can never achieve true victory, because you can never replicate the conditions under which previous performances occurred. You're competing against results that were achieved under circumstances that no longer exist. Understanding this framework helps explain why sexual technique improvement often fails to address the core psychological wound. The issue isn't your absolute performance level, it's your relative ranking in a competition where the rules and conditions were different for previous competitors. The framework also explains why her sexual past continues to affect the relationship long after discovery. You're trapped in permanent competition against advantages you can never obtain and performances you can never replicate. Dealing with the emotional theft feeling requires developing what I call a recovery and acceptance strategy that addresses both the immediate psychological damage and the long-term relationship implications of learning about her sexual past. The recovery process begins with honest assessment of whether the relationship terms are acceptable given the full information about her historical treatment patterns. This means evaluating whether you can genuinely accept receiving inferior treatment compared to previous partners without developing lasting resentment. The strategy also requires distinguishing between information that helps you understand relationship dynamics versus information that only creates pain without providing actionable insights. Some details about her past may be necessary for informed decision-making, while others serve no constructive purpose. Recovery often involves reframing the situation from personal failure to marketplace dynamics. Understanding that her treatment patterns reflect her psychology and decision-making systems rather than your inadequacy can help reduce self-blame and performance anxiety. The acceptance component requires making conscious decisions about whether to stay and work within the revealed treatment hierarchy or leave to find relationships where you can occupy higher treatment rankings from the beginning. The strategy must also address ongoing psychological triggers and comparison thoughts that will likely persist throughout the relationship. Developing mental frameworks for managing these intrusive thoughts becomes crucial for relationship sustainability. Most importantly, the recovery strategy should include honest evaluation of whether the relationship provides sufficient value to justify accepting the revealed terms and treatment ranking, or whether your resources would be better invested in relationships with more favourable dynamics. This strategy isn't about becoming controlling or possessive about her past. It's about making informed decisions about your future based on complete information about relationship dynamics and treatment patterns. Understanding why her sexual past feels like emotional theft has significant implications for long-term relationship success and personal satisfaction that extend far beyond the initial discovery period. These implications include ongoing performance pressure that may persist throughout the relationship as you continue competing against historical standards and experiences. The awareness that your sexual performance directly impacts relationship security creates persistent anxiety that can affect intimacy quality. The revelations also impact trust and emotional safety in ways that may never fully recover. Knowing that she was more generous and enthusiastic with others can create lasting doubt about her attraction level and genuine feelings, regardless of her verbal reassurances. Long-term implications include the potential for resentment, accumulation as daily experiences become contaminated by historical comparison awareness. What should be positive relationship moments can become reminders of superior treatment provided to previous partners. The psychological impact often affects self-esteem and confidence in ways that extend beyond the relationship into other areas of life. Feeling like you received inferior treatment despite superior investment can create lasting doubts about your value and desirability. Understanding these long-term implications helps explain why sexual past discussions often permanently alter relationship satisfaction, even when couples stay together. The knowledge changes the psychological framework through which all future experiences are interpreted. Most importantly, recognizing these implications allows for informed decision-making about whether to invest further in relationships that may never recover from the psychological damage created by learning about historical treatment disparities. If this analysis has helped you understand why learning about your partner's sexual past can feel like discovering emotional theft, and want to learn more about navigating these complex relationship dynamics, subscribe to this channel for more insights into relationship psychology, attachment patterns, and strategic thinking about modern partnerships. Hit that notification bell because understanding these psychological realities could help you make better decisions about relationship investment and compatibility. Share this video with any man who needs to understand that the pain of discovering her sexual past isn't about insecurity or jealousy. It's about recognizing unfavorable treatment terms and marketplace dynamics that affect fundamental relationship satisfaction. The goal isn't to shame women for their sexual pasts or to promote unrealistic standards about experience levels. The goal is to understand the psychological dynamics that make these discoveries so devastating and to help men make informed decisions about relationship investment based on complete information about treatment patterns and historical precedents. Understanding why her sexual past feels like emotional theft allows you to address these feelings constructively rather than destructively, whether that means working to accept the revealed dynamics or choosing to invest your energy in relationships with more favorable terms and treatment hierarchies.